we're going to continue with another lecture, this time by Professor Yuana Jurevi from Warsaw University. She is a Sanskritist, and she specializes in Vedic thought. So the title of her presentation, her lecture, is Veda Pratitya Samutpada. That's the Sanskrit version of Pratitya Samutpada in Pali. Veda Pratitya Samutpada and redefinition of concepts. She is going to look at, earlier Professor Asanga Tilaka Ratana has looked at Pratitya Samutpada thought from the Buddha and onward. Okay, now I think she's going to take us back before the Buddha. Before the Buddha. So, Professor Yuana Jurevi.
Thank you very much. Before I go on, I would like to say you that I feel so honored to be here, and I would like to thank very much all of you for inviting me. And I also would like to pass my warmest wishes to Venerable Dhammasami, to may all good thoughts and feelings be with you, and also may this university, this child, develop beautifully and strongly, and may it spread metta around the world. And now I would like, as Venerable Dhammasami has told us, to put all of us back earlier. I mean, earlier, yes, and to the thought which was composed before the Buddha, but which, as I will try to argue and convince you, which the concepts of which were used by the Buddha, but in a very clever way. So I would like to look at the Pratitya Samutpada in Sanskrit, Pratitya Samutpada in Pali, from the perspective of Vedic thought, that is thought which is attested in the hymns of the Rig Veda, in the Brahmanas, and mainly Shatapatha Brahmana, and in the early Upanishads, which are mainly Brihad Aranyaka, Chandogya, and Aitareya Upanishad, which are estimated as being composed before the Buddha. And I would like, I will use the term the Buddha as because I don't feel competent to solve the problem to what extent the Pali canon can be seen as the words of the Buddha himself or not. I know that some scholars discuss it, but I think that I can use the word Buddha in reference to the composer of the Pali canon, and at least Pratitya Samutpada. And as you will see, I assume that the Buddha must have known earlier Vedic thought, contrary again to some scholars like Bronkhorst who think that the Buddha was somehow Buddhism appeared as an independent thinking. But I think that he knew, and that not only he knew the Vedic thought, but also that he masterly used its basic assumptions and concepts to explain his own theories and to refute the theories of his opponents, that is Brahmins. And he also made, the Buddha, he also made his own theory much more general and much more abstract than the Vedic cosmogonies are. And it is possible to find similarities between the Vedic cosmogonies on one hand and the Pratitya Samutpada in many Vedic texts. But it seems to me that the Buddha chose those cosmogonies in his theory of dependent origination, which met two conditions. And firstly, they explicitly expressed creation as transformation of Atman, and secondly, they preserve their cognitive meaning, even if they are taken out from the Vedic context. So, So, generally speaking, we can say that the early Vedic composers, in their theory of creation, in their cosmogonies, assumed the existence of one reality, and the creation of the world was conceived in terms of cognitive process, and more specifically, in terms of self-cognition of reality, which in this process creates conditions for subjective, objective cognition, and cognizes itself in this process. During creation, reality manifests to itself in the form of cosmos and in the form of man, and both these manifestations are called Atman. And the main assumption of the Vedic philosophy is that cognition precedes being, and moreover, cognition creates being. So reality says, let be something, and something appears. So in the first creative act, described already in the Rig Veda, reality asserts its lack of ability to cognize itself as the object of its own cognition. The term avidya, which is the first link of the Pratitya Samutpada, does not appear in Vedic cosmogonies, but the concept of lack of knowledge does. It is most explicitly, we could say, expressed in the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, when reality, which is called Atman, in the form of man, Purusha Vidha in Sanskrit, realizes its own singularity. It realizes that I am alone, I am and only I exist. And then it looks around and does not see anything else but itself, which indicates that not only that there existed nothing aside from itself, but also that Atman was not able to cognize anything else than itself. And I would argue that to this very concept of the primeval assertion of lack of cognition, the Buddha could refer in the first link of his Pratitya Samutpada. But since he rejected the existence of Atman, of any permanent entity, and he also, of Atman, he could overcome this state of lack of cognition in order to create the world, avidya has no sense, neither ontological nor epistemological. It is just a beginning of a process which inevitably will lead entanglement into being born, suffer, and die. I'm sorry, I will need one. So, now we have the second link, which is sanskara. And in Vedic cosmogonies, when reality asserts its own singularity and lack of any other object which it could cognize, it begins to create the object, its second self. In Brihadaranyaka 1-2, the state of lack of cognition, this primeval avidya, we could say, is conceived in terms of death, mrityu, and this mrityu wants to equip itself with itself, we could say. It says, Atman vi syam, I would like to be to have Atman, to be something which has self. And thus, reality will divide itself into cognizing and cognized part, into part which possess Atman and into Atman, we could say. Or we could say into subject and object, which are ontologically one, but epistemologically distinct. One cognizes, the other one is cognized. And moreover, creation of the second self of Atman, of reality, is described in the Shatapatha Brahmana in the descriptions of Agni Chayana. It was a huge ritual during which creation of the second self of reality was reenacted in the fire altar built of bricks. And creation of cognitive abilities in the cosmogonies which described why we should build fire altar. So creation of cognitive abilities is conceived in terms of creation of an eating aspect, which corresponds to the cognizing subject. And on the other hand, the food was created, which corresponded to the object which is cognized. And in the same way as during eating, man creates his Atman, himself, in the same way, reality creates its Atman, which is the world. And the process of creation of the second self in cognition is expressed in those cosmogonies by the verb sanskrit, to compose. Reality, it is said that Prajapati, this is the name for reality in Shatapatha Brahmana, Atmanam, oh, it should be one A long, Atmanam abhisanskaroti, it creates itself, composes itself. And from this word, from this verb, Sanskrit, the word sanskara, used by the Buddha, is derived. So thus we can see that the beginnings of creation in the Veda can be described in the first terms of the pratitya samutpada. From avidya, sanskara arises. Moreover, the verb sankra is often used in the Vedic cosmogonies to describe the wish, in the context where the wish to compose the second self is expressed. Reality says, Atmanam abhisanskaravai, I would like to create my second self, let me create myself. And this is the subjuncting form of the verb, and creator is presented as hungry of that self. So the meaning of desire of having an Atman is almost. And now, if we take into account that the Buddha rejected existence of Atman, of any permanent reality, we can see that such wish is senseless. Now, the next link is Vijnana. I cannot go into all details because of lack of the time, so I will just summarize generally the meaning of the word Vijnana in the early Vedic cosmogonies. And it is, this word names the highest subjective manifestation of reality in cosmos and in man, seen as the result of building its cosmic and human Atman. So, firstly, reality cannot cognize itself. Then, It wants to create Atmanam, something which will cognize itself. And then it creates Vijnana, a faculty which will convey the cognition. So Vijnana is able to create conditions which are necessary for further subjective-objective cognition. That is, subjective and objective manifestations of reality. And thanks to that, thanks to Vijnana, reality will confirm its unity and existence. It is like an everyday subjective, objective process of self-cognition. I don't understand myself, this is avidya. I want to create a self which I can cognize, this is creation thanks to this sanskara, and now I have a faculty which will allow me to cognize myself, my Atman, jnana, and this is myself, this is assertion of my existence. But for the Buddha, there is not such reality who is the subject of this process. We could say there is no Atman. We could say that the situation of Atman, which does not exist, is very miserable according to the Buddha. It not only does not exist, but it also postulates its false existence and thus merges deeper and deeper in these false assumptions. The next link is Nama-Rupa. In Vedic cosmogonies, the term Nama-Rupa is used to express the cognitive activity of Vijnana, we could say, in its creative cognition. And according to the assumption that cognition precedes being, giving a name, Naman, necessarily results in creation of an ontic form, real ontic form, Rupa. Again, in Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, Atman is presented as giving names and forms to its cosmic and human manifestations, and when he finally does it, enters cosmos and man up to the nail tips. So he finally has his Atman fully developed, we can say. So on one hand, Atman confirms its identity with itself, we could say. On the other hand, it becomes the manifest subject which is ready to cognize everything, and he thinks that it is not me, but him, because it is its object, but it does it only to confirm that he is the one. We could say, as if plays with himself. He says, oh, it's not me, and then, oh, it's me. So put in terms of the pratitya samutpada, this process is completely absurd, because there is anything like, and there is no reality called Atman. No one gives names, no one assumes shapes. We could say that the Buddha, having rejected the existence of permanent reality, preserved the idea of the process, which is meaningless from his point of view. Now we have the link called Shardayatana, and the term Ayatana is used in the cosmogony presented in the Aitareya Upanishad, and it refers to the place. Ayatana means the places from which cognitive abilities of Atman, cosmos and man, can perform cognition. These cognitive abilities are more numerous than those in Pratitya Samutpada, because in the Aitareya Upanishad we have speech, vach, nose, nasika, eyes, akshini, ears, karna, skin, twach, heart, hridaya, navel, nabhi, and penis, chishna. So this set of subjective organs foreshadows later Brahmanic distinction between senses of knowledge, jnanendriya, and senses of action, karmendriya. But in his ayatanas, the Buddha chooses only those powers which are evidently cognitive. So he rejects Nabhi, for example. We have eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, and manas. Am I right? So it shows that his general and abstract attitude towards Vedic material. And what is important also here, that according to the Aitareya Upanishad, the appearance of the subjective organs immediately results in creation of their objects. This is in accordance with the assumption of creative power of cognition. The object, we could say that the objects are created in the moment the subjective powers begin to act. For example, when eye appears, its power to see appears, chakshus, and its object, which is the sun, too. So, according to the Aitareya Upanishad, creation of ayatanas is creation of subjective organs, subjective powers, and their objects. And as far as I am aware, in the same way, Shadayatanas are understood by the Buddha. It is creation of the, on one hand of manas, and on the other hand of objects of manas, for example. But of course, but of course the Buddha again rejects reality of Atman. So the cognizing faculties and their object appear, but there is no one for whom it could appear. Now we have sparsha, which is contact between the subject and the object in the Vedic cosmogonies, and the same as in the Pratitya Samutpada, as far as I know. And this is in Vedic cosmogonies. It is an obvious result of the previous creative phase. And now we have Vedana. And the Vedana does not appear in this very term in Vedic cosmogonies, but the root vid, from which Vedana derives, appears in a very interesting passage in Chandogya Upanishad. It describes the cognition of a liberated Atman just after long. It's the end of a long story, but let me read it, because I think that the Buddha could somehow refer to this very situation. Now, when this is translation of Patrick Olivelle. Now, when this sight here gazes into space, this is seeing person, chakshushah purushah. The faculty of sight enables one to see. The one who is aware, Athayo Veda, let me smell this. This is the self, Atman. The faculty of smell enables him to smell. The one who is aware, Athayo Veda, let me say this. This is the self. The faculty of speech enables him to speak. The one who is aware, Athayo Veda, let me listen to this. This is the self, Atman. The faculty of hearing enables him to hear. The one who is aware, Athayo Veda, let me think about this. This is the self. That is the self, Atman. The mind is his divine faculty of sight. So we can see that the root vid describes the awareness of Atman, we could say in Buddha's way, of sparsha, of the subjective, objective cognition, and its desire to perform it. Again, here it is subjunctive form is used. Let me idam jigraniti. Let me smell this. So the result of the process, according to the Chandogya Upanishad, is joy of the self, who is very happy to confirm his existence, the joy of Atman, but the problem is that there is no Atman. So there is no one who is aware, who your Veda, that he wants to smell, to speak, to listen, to see, and to think. There is only an absurd, self-propelling process because of the very first false cognitive act. Now, again, due to lack of time, I will leave next two links. I mean, I don't have time to discuss them. That is Trishna and Upadana. I will just say that in Vedic cosmogonies, the subjective activity, objective activity must go on because it fuels the existence of the world. And I use the word fuel very consciously because the images of fire appear in this context, both in the Veda and also in the Pali canon, as Gombrich has shown. So Trishna in the Rig Veda, the verb trish, from which Trishna comes, is used very often to describe we could say, hunger of fire. A fire will die without the fuel, so it is hungry of this fuel. This is the Trishna in the Vedic cosmogonies. So fire grasps it, as Upadana says, and such a strong desire of a subject which does not exist from the point of view of the Buddha is really, again, observed. So we have very strong desire of existence, but in Vedic cosmogonies it is fulfilled. In Pratitya Samutpada there is no one who can feel this desire. Moreover, in the Vedic cosmogonies, when reality equipped with its second self, with its Atman V reality, recognizes its identity with one of its objects, it resumes this cognition. This is the mechanism of existence of the world, the constant recognition of unity of reality. I mean, the show goes on all the time. And we could say that from the point of view of Vedic cosmogonies, Trishna and Upadana are necessary condition of existence of cosmos and man. And in fact, the same is in the Pratitya Samutpada, although the difference is crucial, because in Vedic cosmogonies, Trishna and Upadana are necessary conditions of existence of Atman, and in Pratitya Samutpada, they are necessary conditions of existence of something which does not exist. So they are the result of false knowledge. And thus we could say that bhava, the next link of Pratitya Samutpada, is the natural result of the earlier stages, which are desire for cognizing, Trishna, and its realization, which is Upadana. And in Aitareya Upanishad, in this cosmogony to which I've already referred, reality equipped with its second self, with its Atman, becomes, it is being born from a woman, and the physical birth of Atman is described, as I already mentioned, as I have just mentioned in Aitareya Upanishad. There are 3 births of Atman are mentioned. The first one is impregnation, the second one is birth, and the third one is death. And the Buddha, we could say, evokes 3 births, these births of Atman in his 2 links, which are Jati and Jara Marana. So let me conclude. I think that similarities between the Vedic cosmogonies and the Pratitya Samutpada are too evident to be pure coincidence. If we agree that the Buddha, in formulating his Pratitya Samutpada, was referring to Vedic cosmogony, not only, of course, but also, his chain would be treated as its general model, but negating its metaphysical cognitive and moral sense. To apply the doctrine of anatta here would be to deny the Atman as the metaphysical basis of all creative transformations, as well as their final forms, as they successively appear in the stages of the process. And this deprives Vedic cosmogonies of their positive meaning as the successful activity of reality, and presents creation as a chain of an absurd, meaningless changes, which could only result in the repeated death of anyone who would reproduce this creative process in ritual activity and everyday life. And I would like to propose a mental experiment here, because we know that the Buddha preached his sermons to educated people well versed with the concepts and general idea of Vedic cosmogonies. To them, all the terms used in the Pratitya Samutpada had a definite meaning, and they evoked definite associations. And let us imagine the Buddha enumerating all the stages of, we could say, Vedic cosmogony, Vedic creation, only to conclude. That's right. It is how the whole process develops. However, there is only one little problem. No one undergoes a transformation here. So I think that from the persuasive point of view, it would be a brilliant strategy. We could say that it would be the act of, we could say, really nirvana in the sense, blowing out of Atman, which was conceived in the Veda as fiery. And this very act of extinguishing Atman deprives all these well-defined concepts of their meaning and challenges the infability of all the associations, and express the meaninglessness, absurdity of all the creative developments they express. There is no one who could state its lack of knowledge, no one who would wish to equip itself with Atman, no one who performs subjective, objective cognition as you Brahmins think. There is only a meaningless process which can only lead to suffering. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Professor Yurivik, for your wonderful presentation. For most of the, or for many of the in the audience who are not familiar to Sanskrit terms like Atman, which is equal to Atta, Anatman, which is equal to Anatta, Pratitya Samutpada, which is equal to Pratitya Samutpada. So those terms which Professor Yurevik has referred to and used in lecture, in my hypothesis, some of you who are not used to these terms. Professor Yurevik was illustrating that, okay, in teaching Pratitya in promoting or in presenting the Pratitya, the Buddha was actually responding to an earlier idea. The earlier idea, the pre-Buddhist idea, comes from Vedic philosophy. And she explained that, and it's very interesting. Drishna is Dhanha. In Burmese, we call it Dhanha. That is the equivalent, sorry for the electricity. So Professor Yuna Yurivi was pointing out selectively. Of course, she didn't go into all the 12 links and how the 12 links has some connection with the pre-Buddhist Vedic thought and how the Buddha was responding to them. And Professor Asanga Ratna, Tilaka Ratna, and also Professor Yuna Yurivi, both speakers, have linked beautifully the Patchathorn teaching with the theory of non-self, anatta, in their own way. So now I think we have more than the time we are allocated. Actually, in the program, we are allocated about 30 minutes for questions and answers. Actually, we have a little more than that. We have about 40 minutes. So before I give the opportunity to the floor, I'd like to ask Professor Sangalana if you have anything to add or maybe anything to comment on Professor Yurivi. And I also ask you if you have anything to add or anything to comment or even ask a question to Professor Tilaka Ratna. So this is the privilege of being the speakers. Can I have can I have the microphone here? Yeah. Yes. Maybe you can bring that one. You want to go there? And do you have a wireless microphone for the audience? Yeah. Okay. Just 1 second now. We do. Yeah. Can you bring your microphone first so that we can use it here? Your wireless microphone. Can you bring it?
Okay. Venerable sirs, ladies and gentlemen, I'm not planning to give another talk because I have already spoken 1 hour. In fact, I was trying to understand Paticca Samuppada as we find in the Buddhist canon. And then Professor Yurevik's presentation, of course I need to look at it carefully, and then this is the first time I'm listening to her trying to understand the Paticcasamuppada doctrine in the historical context. I think something very important that comes from her research and also research of Professor Richard Gomrich I earlier referred to, that Buddhism did not arise in a vacuum. But also it shows that Buddha was really influenced, inspired, and also responding to some of the Vedic developments. Now, I need to study her views carefully, but I can see that how some of these ideas were already in the Indian tradition, how these ideas were gradually developing. And for example, she refers to Trishna, Tanha, literally means thirst. Now, it is the thirst, and then also it is connected with the fuel. Now, these are very interesting. These metaphors have been used by the Buddha in his teaching. I think for me, when I look at this, I am fascinated to see that how the historical context, how Buddhist ideas were developing. And then in the Buddhist tradition, usually we know that Buddha studied things under certain Brahmins, and then he got married, and then next up to 29 years, we think that he had fun. But it looks like that actually, it's not merely having fun, as Siddhartha, having really mastered the Indian tradition, Indian philosophical tradition. So we don't have particular information about them. But I think what her research reveals is that, what happened, how did Buddha, because these can't be accidents. And then the other thing, Buddha cannot have created a totally different new language, because if you create a new language, people don't understand you. So both good and bad of the whole thing is, on the one hand, you have to use the existing language, but on the other hand, when you are using the existing language, you are always at the danger of being misunderstood. So, but on the other hand, there is no any other way to tread, because you have to use the existing. But here you can see, if I understand correctly, taking this cosmological, the explanations, ultimately relating to each individual being. So, you have the cosmological explanation, but ultimately how it refers to the individual. So in that sense, of course, there are differences between what I said and what she said, but I think basically these are two ways of understanding this concept.
Professor Uribe.
Thank you very much. Well, of course, I would like to stress very strongly that I'm not saying that, it is not my intention that the Buddha was just influenced by some concept, Brahminic. No, he was not influenced, he just used them against Brahmins very brilliantly. And somehow he won with their own weapons. So this is something which really amazes me. That it shows his extraordinary, not only spiritual features but also intellectual features. That he could somehow redefine Vedic concepts in such a way, such clever way that they, and then of course I'm also not saying that this is the whole meaning of the Pratitya Samutpada, because we saw there are a lot of other meanings, and we saw in Professor's lecture too, which was very interesting, and I was especially interested in the concept of freedom, and that we have all the time choice, this free will. Yes, this was very interesting for me. So.
Thank you to both professors. I think this is only the first panel of this conference, and we have already had two perspectives. And for me, okay, what I got from the presentation is the cosmological way of looking at it. This is to link to the pre-Buddhist thought, because Atman or Atta or the creator or Brahma, whichever word you want to use it, he created the world. This is according to Brahmanism. And just as Professor Uribe said, the Buddha was using the Vedic language to deny the very existence of Atman or Brahma or the creator. So that's about taking on cosmology. But when Professor Uribe was talking about Drishna or Tanha, and the same Professor Sangha was saying that Tanha is an emotional, if we use the popular word EQ, the emotional intelligence. So then this is about psychology. So two ways of approaching it, from cosmological approach and from psychological perspective. I think now it's time to open the floor, and we would welcome any question from the floor. You can direct your question to any of the two professors, but kindly make your question short to the point, and also first identify yourself, who you are and which institution you belong to. So any question? Yes, please. Microphone.
Dear Professor, my name is Pandita. I study to the Yangon University, MBA study. I want to know your again and again, you say this to be is a samsara. To be is a samsara. To be is samsara. Not to be is what? I want to think. I want to know. You explain.
In fact, this Anatma doctrine and also the ordinary way of looking at this Sangmuti and Paramatha. Now, on the one hand, in Anatma doctrine, we say there is no Sattva, there is no Pudgala. And on the other hand, in our day-to-day experience, it basically comes in the Buddhist popular practice. As we witness every day, we do a lot of meritorious things and things like that. So ultimately, there is the question here. Now, how do you reconcile these two things? On the one hand, you say that kammassa karako natti, there is no doer for the action. And then you go to explain everything according to Skandha Dhatu Ayatana. Now, one way to do it would be to admit that there is a contradiction, there is a problem here, and leave it at that. But on the other hand, we know that we can't do that, because Buddhist tradition, if you look at it, from the time of the Buddha, you can see that people have been this different, the mentality. Now, let me just try an example. Suppose we have in the Buddhist tradition Anupubbi Katha. Anupubbi Katha means the Buddha's teaching is gradual. Just imagine a situation when a Buddha goes to visit some group of people. He starts with very ordinary speech. Dana Katha, Sila Katha, Sagga Katha, and so on, how you give dana and how you go to heaven and all that. However, gradually Buddha takes this sermon to a level where by the time Buddha comes to that, by the time Buddha starts Dana Katha, Sila Katha, Sagga Katha, everybody is very happy. But when the Buddha elevates his speech to that other level, maybe some people feel drowsy, some people feel that they have something to do next day, like that. So they start simply getting up and going. But when the Buddha completes, I would imagine, maybe there are only very few people. But they are the people who really, went to the ultimate, maybe Buddha started the whole village, but everybody got up and then maybe just one or two people are waiting to listen to this last part. Now, this is, Reverend, what I meant. So, at level, Buddha never rejected. I think Buddha was not unrealistic to see that everybody could see Anatta. Everybody could attain Nirvana. So, it's a gradual process. In that gradual process, many of us want to be in the samsara. And then gradually, we will come to that level. Some lucky people, like say, in the Rattapala Sutta is a typical example. So it looks like only Rattapala left at that last point. But he comes to the Buddha and says, well, the way you teach, I don't think I can practice this at home. I want to leave. But that's an enormous and tremendous decision on his part. So that is not to be in the samsara. So I think this is what I try to explain in that venerable. Thank you. Thank you for your question.
Thank you. As many of you know, to be and not to be, this is a Shakespearean the quote from Shakespeare, and Professor Asangatilka Ratana, put it in his lecture, and the question is very appropriate. So next question. Microphone, please. Here.
Thank you very much for your enlightening presentation, Professor Asinga. and I'm from SSBU. And so, if I heard correctly, I think a professor said there is no difference between nibbana and samsara. Is it? If I heard correctly.
Finish your question first, Professor.
Yeah, and another question is, you said, if Saunyata is okay for you, and everything is okay for you. If Saunyata is not okay for you, then could you please clarify this statement? Okay, thank you.
Thank you again. I think I touched this second part, Nagarjuna, and of course I should have been a little more careful because I know that with Sanskrit, Burmese academic tradition is yet to capture Sanskrit. Now what I said is actually Nagarjuna's statement, na sansarasya nirvanat kinchidaste visheshanam, is being interpreted by people to say that there is no distinction between sansara and nirvana. So what I suggested is, that is not what Nagarjuna meant. Of course, what I say is open to contest. But what I say is, when Nagarjuna says that, what he means is, there is absolutely nothing that makes distinguish sansara from nirvana, because both phenomena are ultimately swabhavaless or devoid of swabhava. That is the point I want to make. So, not that I am agreeing with the statement that sansara is nirvana or nirvana is sansara. I am proposing a somewhat different way to read that, so they interpret it. So that is what I was really doing. So, I mean, with that answer, I think the second question is automatically answered. So, thank you.
Just for the sake of the listener, the one who questions is associate professor here teaching meditation and also at ITBM in Yangon. So the saying, sometimes that you read, in contemporary literature, that samsara and nirvana are no different. This is an interpretation that they attribute to Nagarjuna. But Professor extracted the original saying of Nagarjuna, and he has given a different interpretation. He's saying that's not what Nagarjuna meant. So this is okay. Any more question? Here, Keshe something. Okay. Keshe Tamchu. Here, second line. This is a Nagarjuna expert from Dharamsala.
First of all, I would like to say happy birthday to you. My name is Tenzin Thamche from the Institute of Buddhist Dialectic, Dharamsala. And my question is to Professor Joanna. So I'm just wondering, before the Buddha came, do they talk about the two truths? When you talk about the emptiness, you just mentioned is it just a negation of material things. So over here, most of the people, when they think about the emptiness, emptiness is something kind of like a vacuum. But actually, what it says is emptiness, when we hear the word of the emptiness, what we have to think is emptiness, it's a negation of the inherent existence. When we talk about the ultimate truth, on the other hand, Buddha also mentioned there's a conventional truth. On the conventional truth, everything lies, everything exists. But on the ultimate truth, it's a kind of like introspection on the intellectual basis. Then we don't find anything. Anything doesn't mean that, it doesn't exist. It exists due to the interdependence. So I'm just wondering, so normally there are two dangers of falling into externalism and nihilism. So during the Buddha's period, non-Buddhist masters, they asked the question, 14 different types of questions to the Buddha, and the Buddha didn't answer. Why? Because they might fall into the danger of nihilism. So out of pityness and kindness, so he didn't talk about. But most of the non-Buddhist masters, and also even these days too, they just think that, oh, emptiness is nothing. But actually it's a negation of the, what? Inherent existence. He's not denying that nothing exists. He accepts that it exists, but on the conventional basis.
Thank you very much. But what I was saying, just trying to say, when I was saying that the Buddha says that there is no one who recognizes and so on, I was just thinking about the Brahminic concept of Atman, and not so. In this interpretation, his negation refers only to the way of to this being postulated by the Brahmins, and not as we could say ultimate truth. Just well, we could say that he referred to the conventional truth of Brahmins, and he says that they were wrong because I'm not sure if I'm clear, but and the concept of well, emptiness, it would be difficult. Well, there is something in the we could say that the beginning of but it is different in Vedic cosmogony. So let's leave it. But what I was saying, it is not. I didn't want to be understood that the Buddha was nihilist, not at all. He just denied what the Brahmins told, the existence of Atman. Brahmins postulated.
And also regarding the self, you talks about the second self.
What?
The second self.
Second self, yes. So this is Atman, I would say.
And what is the first self?
That's a very good question. In
Why?
fact, because it is very difficult to say it in English. In Sanskrit, when for example we have sentence Atman Visyam, this means I would like to have self. So now the question is, who is that I who wants to have the self? So I somehow presupposed that this is the first self. The first self is me who wants to have myself, you know. And now we are getting so one is I, the first self, and I want to recognize myself. And in order to recognize it, I need to create it somehow.
Normally,
this is the way of thinking in Vedic cosmogonies. Mm-hmm.
Normally, what do we say? What do we say is, where is I? Where is self? If we just, let's say, the self is a separate entity from our body, then I can't say I'm feeling cold. I'm at the Shan University. Why? Because it's a separate entity. If I say myself, but my body is self, if I cut my fingernails, I can't say that, oh, I fell down. Yes. And if I say my consciousness is the self, then again it becomes a contradiction. Why? Because I have got like eye consciousness, nose consciousness, so it becomes like too many self. So as for self, normally in a birth, what do we say is the primary cause and the secondary cause. At the time of birth, one consciousness comes into the mother's womb. This is the primary consciousness. Right now, the primary consciousness that I have is because of the previous consciousness.
I see.
So this is the primary consciousness. The secondary, it's a kind of like causes are the chromosomes from dad, mom, and also the elements. So when I die, so I will just, like my consciousness, it will go only one, not two consciousness. Otherwise, if I have two self, then I have to born twice.
Yes, that's true. Yes, but in fact, we could say when we die, we are left with only. We could say we are left without this. We are left without this material Atman. When we are after death, our body dissolves or whatever, and this is in fact in Vedic Sanskrit the word Atman means also body, everything it means whole, and it means everything which makes me myself, we could say, beginning with the body and ending with something which is inside, with essence, whatever, how would we call it. it does not mean as in later philosophy, the eternal soul. In the early cosmogony, it means, we could say, yes, individual human being. But to exist, it needs, of course, also this visible part, which is body. And creation is conceived in the same way, that as if something immaterial, reality which is immaterial, equips itself with material, perceptible body, which is the world. But it is still one self. It is still one self, but somehow it pretends that it has two, that it's divided into two, only to confirm, no, it is one self.
So the argument between the Chitramatra mind-only school and the Prasangika school, right now the same thing, they raise the same question. But the Prasangika, what they say is, we don't need two souls, we don't need two self. Only one is enough.
Self is one. To think that we have two self is false, is only in the moment of creation, when then, but the aim of creation in Vedic cosmogony is to realize, no, there is one self. This world, which is different from, seems to be different from reality, which is unmanifest, and here it is manifest, is one self. That unity somehow divides into two in order to confirm that it is one. Maybe now it's better. This is the way Brahmans think, early Brahmans. Thank you for your questions very much and discussion.
I would like to ask if Professor Sangha has anything to say on this exchange.
In fact, Venerable question is very interesting question and challenging question. Another way to look at this would be, again from Samruti and Paramartha. Now in ordinary English language we say, I want to look at myself, I want to understand myself, or I want to restrain my mind. So all this language presupposes some kind of duality. I want to see myself. So, but the interesting thing is, now so long as, in particular stage of your practice, your life, you want to see, I want to do this, I want to do that, and all that. But ultimately what happens is that has to be continued till to a certain point. But ultimately, if I say that I want to do this, I want to restrain myself, I am an arahant, I think you are not an arahant, because then you are still thinking about I am doing something. Actually, the difference between, say, for example, Advaita Vedanta and Buddhism is, ultimately Advaita Vedanta seems to be saying that I remains, everything else goes, I remains. But Buddhism says, ultimately, I disappears. So, but we start with, I want to do this, I want to do good things, I want to practice. I mean, that is the beginning level. You can't do without that, I think. Then there you assume that there are two things. But you carry on with that, and then ultimately you come to a level, this I, which I thought is a farce. It doesn't exist. There you have reached the anatta or shunya or, whatever that does. I think this is where, so the problem, Venerable, can be seen in the level of language, level of Samruti and Paramartha. And also the practice, we can't carry on without really assuming that I want to do something. I mean, that you need. However, ultimately, you give up that. Perhaps Dhammapi pahatabba. Ultimately, you give up, let go everything. And then, so ultimately the thing is, there is no one who has become an arahant. Thank you, Reverend.
This is a fascinating discussion. In Indian philosophy, as many of us know, Dvaita Vada and Advaita Vada, this is the heart of that realization. When you realize the Atman and Brahman are not the same, is one thing, that you reach the point of moksha. So in the Brahmanism, and Professor and both professors are discussing here how the Buddhists respond to that is.
Professor, I take interest in your word.
Just now, Professor Tiraratanake, Tilakaratane, you says, Paticca Samuppada cannot be on par with the rest. Why? Please explain.
This is Professor Pancho Panaruji, okay, one of the speakers here.
Thank you very much, sir, for that question. In fact, when I said that Paticca cannot be on par with other doctrines, what I referred to is general misunderstanding of, the not knowing where it really fits. So we put all these things together and we discuss first chapter, Four Noble Truths, second chapter, Paticca, and we go on like that. But I think that way of looking at doesn't help very much. But if you take Four Noble Truths, behind Four Noble Truths is Paticca. If you look at how suffering arises and ceases, in the Four Noble Truth doctrine, Buddha doesn't go into that theoretical aspect, but Buddha says simply the experiential aspect. However, if you go one step further down, what lies behind is Paticca. How do you explain it? I mean, at that level is that's what I meant. So Paticca is there, but some people ask why Buddha did not teach Paticca in the first Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta. It's very interesting. It's like interestingly, somewhat misleadingly, something like this. We know how to drive a car, but we may not be experts in the engine. Sometimes you may even not need to be expert in the engine. So it's something like that. Of course, without knowing Paticca, I don't think you can become complete the path. But it is more theoretical thing. If you say tanha causes dukkha, how it is explained is really in Paticca. But on the other hand, Buddha was explaining at that level. Of course, we don't know now, if you take the original story, we don't need to be naive to think that this Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta is the only thing Buddha said those 7 days. Because we have the traditional story. Buddha said Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta. It took the whole night. So must have said so many things. And then every rest of the week, when one person was going for Pindapata, to others Buddha was talking. So Buddha must have gone into so much detail. So when we ask why Buddha did not teach Paticca in Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, I think that question has to be a little bit carefully taken. So why it can't be on par with, then we don't we kind of ignore or bypass seeing that the theoretical explanatory aspect of Paticca. In other words, Paticca is not something like Sattatinsasi Bodhipakkhya Dhamma. It's not something to be practiced. It's something to be realized. Now when the Buddha says, Uppadava Tathagatanang, Anuppadava Tathagatanang, Titavasadatu Dhammatita. It has been in the universe. Buddha reveals it. So Paticca is not a creation by the Buddha. But Four Noble Truth formula, you can see Buddha articulated it. This is the difference I want to make. Because if you put all these things together, then you don't see that particular significance of that. Of course, we can debate about it, but
we still have time. Yes.
May I ask 2 questions? I'm Mattia Salvini. I have a question for each speaker. So for Professor Tilakaratane, my question is about the understanding of the syntax of the Mangalacharana of the Mula Madhyamaka Karika, of the syntax. So you mentioned that you read the Anirodha Manucheda, Anupadam, etc. as being actually Visheshanas. And I think that's the only possibility in a way, because we would require at least one cha somewhere to read the verse in a different way, according to the natural syntax. And I think that is also the standard way in which that verse is read. In the Prasannapada, for example, the Ashta Visheshana Vishishta Pratitya Samutpada is the Abhideya, is understood as the Abhideya. And also if we look at other texts, even not directly commenting, but like the Tattva Sangraha, the Mangalacharana there is a remake of this Mangalacharana, and we see how the parallel works also suggests that we should follow that. So, and also I think that this Mangalacharana reflects a feature of Mahayana Sutras, which is not shared by non-Mahayana Sutras, of applying certain qualifiers, which normally would refer only to Nirvana, but applied to Praditya Samutpada. So for example, we would find something like that in the Shalistamba Sutra. So I was wondering whether you are actually aware of someone or of some commentary who does otherwise, because I haven't encountered it. So this is my question for you. Should I wait for the answer before I ask the other question? Or? Okay, thank you.
Thank you. That's a...
This is Professor Mattia from Mahidol University.
Okay, thank you, Mathiani. That's very interesting. In fact, my point there is, I'm aware that, this Mangalacharana, original, the initial statement is open for debate. But on the other hand, we know that we have about standard 8 or 9 English translation alone on Mula Madhyamika Karika, which shows that, the interpretation is pretty wide open. But I am not a participant of post-modernist or, like you can interpret anything. I'm not holding that view. But I do believe that grammatically you must be able to explain at least, because you have to, it's an assumption. You have to know, we have to believe that the author knew the grammar that we know today. It's a highly questionable assumption, but still otherwise you can't do anything. So if we assume that Nagarjuna was using the text in the grammar we know, then you can say Anirodhang, Anutpadang, all these accusative case singular. So ultimately you have Pratitya Samutpadang, Prapanchopasamam, Shivam. So at least the way I look at it, it is a little bit even different from Kalupahana looks at it. I think this whole thing can be interpreted in a one coherent manner, and justification for that is you look at the entire Mula Madhyamika Karika, you can see that every single chapter except the 26th, he is using Pratitya Samutpada as the method. So this is how I derive it. But of course, Prasannapada interpretation is different. And so I do admit. So mine is really one among other interpretations, but I would support it not only syntactically, but internal evidence, basically, how it has been used. And then referring to your remark that this Mangalacharana thing is actually, of course, it's also common in later Pali works also. So I think it is a common aspect for many, many things. Like even Buddhaghosa would start something like that, The looking at Buddhaghosa, Visuddhimagga and some other things, you can see that it is something like of course, the purpose is introduction. You are just going to say what you are going to do. So in Nagarjuna's case, he doesn't directly say that, but for him to just to isolate Pratitya Samutpada, I think he has to have a good reason. I think that is what he is doing. But anyhow, we could debate this over a cup of tea or something. Please, your second question.
My second question is for Professor Jurovitz, and my question is about a point of grammar which I thought could be of some interest. I was wondering whether you came across it. And it's about the section on the ayatana. So that would have been when you were discussing the Chandogya 8:12:4-5. And that reminded me of a discussion about the derivation of the word Indriya. So there's this sutra, Panini Sutra 5.293 of Indriyam, Indralingam, Indradrushtam, Indrasrushtam, Indrajushtam, Indradattam, Itiva, which seems related actually to this Upanishadic passage. And it's often understood by grammatical commentator as referring to Atma. So the Indra is always interpreted as Atma. But there's if we look at two derivations of two authors which are almost contemporary, Vasubandhu and Buddhaghosa, when they discuss the word Indriya, both of them refer to the sutra. One of them, which is Buddhaghosa, actually uses it to derive the word Indriya, but without referring to Atta. And then he gives a Nirukta interpretation, and Vasubandhu has only the Nirukta interpretation of Indanti iti Indriya, which does away with the Atma altogether. So I was wondering whether you had looked into Panini as a possible further evidence of this kind of process.
Well, I am just came to my mind that in the Aitareya Upanishad, I must check it, but it is not etymology of Indriya, I mean Nirukta of Indriya, but the something, how it is idam drish, how it is in the sutta? Yes, so this is very interesting, because in the cosmogony of Aitareya Upanishad, it is Atman transforms itself into these ayatanas, objects and subjects and objects, and then it is said, and we can then its next manifestation is man, human being, and it is the same as the cosmos as far as cognitive abilities are concerned. And then it is said that Atman, the creator, makes a whole here of cosmos and man, goes inside cosmos and man, looks around and says, and it realizes that Atman is Brahman, and then it's said, he is called Idandra because idam drishtam. So, well, I can find the passage very, very, very easily. I don't remember exactly, but it sounds very, very similar, and so maybe it will be of some help. I think that really Aitareya Upanishad is important. Well, anyway, okay, we'll discuss later. Thank you. Thank you very much for your question.
We can have one last question if there's anyone. Okay, microphone at the back here.
My name is Sunanda. I'm from University of Global Peace. I have one question for Jonah, Professor Jonah at first. It is, you present about Brahma, is it? So it is exists, right? Or it is just a name, Brahma? It's Brahma is just a name, or it is real exist?
It's a simple question. Okay, Brahma, is it just a name, or does it really exist?
It's not a simple question. It's very because when we look at history of this name, in the early Veda, Brahman means power of sacred speech. In the very early Veda. Then it also means, because it comes from the root brih, which means enlarge, to enlarge, to grow, to expand. And in the very, very early Veda, it refers to the power of speech and also power of breath, which expands in us. And later, but it is not a name. It means something which exists really in the Upanishads. I am not sure if I answered you, because it's really difficult question. And the story shows that it slowly became the name for something which exists. But in the beginning, it was just power, but maybe power of sacred words, power of Rig Veda, you know, this power which makes, power of word, which makes that when you say a word, something appears. This was called Brahman. So, well, I'm afraid that I didn't answer you, but it is really difficult question.
Thank you.
Professor Yuri was okay giving the answer, from her understanding of the Upanishad. So and of course, we have come to the end of the allocated time. My job as the moderator is to thank the two learned professors, who have come, all the way to be here with us and to share with us their learning. And I hope, their presentation has, both presentations have, so given you some provocation, have provoked your thought into thinking further into the subject. I won't be chairing any more sessions, so I'd like to take one more minute just to impress on you how the Patchathorn is a very important and ongoing investigation for both practitioners of meditation and also scholars. And I have with me two books. This one is by Bhikkhu Buddhadasa Bhikkhu from Thailand, newly published. Of course, this is translated and compiled by one of his disciples, Western disciple, Santikaro Bhikkhu, published last year under the Bodhi tree. Okay, the subtitle is Buddha's Original Vision of Dependent Origination. Original vision. That title, might provoke you into reading this book. This is 2017 publication. The other one, this is Analayo Bhikkhu, the German scholar monk, from Hamburg University. This is his book published this year, Rebirth in Early Buddhism and Current Research. He actually interprets Patchathorn in a different way, different from others. Of course, he looks at the Pali resources and also the Agama, not just Nikaya, but also the Agama, and he can show you the similarities and where interpretation needs looking at again. That sort of thing. So this is another book. So I'm just doing some commercial advertising books. So thank you, Professor Yuna Yurevik and Professor Asangatika Tilakaratna. Can you give them, a big round of applause once again? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Dr. Khammai Dhammasami, Director of SSBU, for leading this section, and also thank you very much for the keynote speaker, Professor Dr. Asanka, and also the opening lectures, Professor Yuna Yurevik. And before we have a lunch break, there will be certificate, appreciation, and gift will be given to the two speakers by the sponsor of this conference, U Aung Soda, Chairman of Myanmar Combiz Company Limited. First, may I invite U Aung Soda, the Chairman of Myanmar Combiz, to the Professor Asanka first. Thank you very much. May I now invite the Professor Joanna Jurewicz to receive the gift from the joint sponsor, who also there. Now is the group photo sections. Yeah. So we are still in the Patchathorn. We don't worry for lunch. We are not going out of Patchathorn. Please be patient, and we also have another group photo with all the speakers. First, for these sections, group photos will be taken. After that, I will invite all the speakers and all the donors and sponsors. Thank you. May I now invite all the speakers and to come on the stage. The group photo will be taken, all the speakers with the Oxford Seattle, the Professor Dr. Khammai Dhammasami, and the Rector of SSBU. Okay, all the speakers, may I now kindly invite all of you, because some professors, they will be leaving, and today morning we still have time. So we are rushing to capture our times before lunch break. Asiale.
Idam khopana bhikkhave dukkham mariya satcham jatipi dukkha jarapi dukkha vyadhipi dukkha maranampi dukkham Appiyehi sampayogo dukkho piyehi vippayogo dukkho yam picham no labhati tampi dukkham sankhitena panchupadana khandha dukkha Idam khopana bhikkhave